All right, so you may know that there's a group within our Historical Society that helps maintain and preserve historic cemeteries in the area that are no longer open or operational. They call themselves the Cemetery Guardians. The chairman of the Cemetery Guardians is Vaughn Harris, and he's sitting at the back. And next, you can put up your hand now, and next to him is Tracy, who is, I guess, a historian, researcher for the Cemetery Guardians. And she's done a lot of research about the families buried in the different plots up in Wilson's Hill Cemetery. And our next guest speaker has some connection to Wilson's Hill. So I was fortunate enough a couple years ago to record Tracy talking about one plot in particular in Wilson's Hill. And I'm going to play this, it's about 1 minute, just over a minute video clip.
Margaret's family. This is the blood of George and Margaret Nevils and 7 of their children. George and Margaret's family contracted dysentery, which was a terrible disease, contagious disease at the time in the early 1890s. They had 6 children die in the space of 7 weeks of dysentery. They ranged from age of, I think, from 4 to 10. Margaret and George were also very ill and were actually unable to attend the funerals of their children because they couldn't get out of bed and their house was in quarantine. They had 3 other children later. One of those children is also buried here. She died at the age of 2 from convulsions. Then their son volunteered at World War I, and he was killed in France. So there's a memorial to him here.
So the one child that was born later and survived was Pearl Neville. And we're going to find out what happened to Pearl. I'm going to ask Jonathan Whiteside to come up here and give his story.
Thank you very much. I guess you can hear me, right? My name is Jonathan Whiteside, and as of today, I'm a future tenant of the cemetery here. Currently, my mom is awaiting her resurrection, and my dad, Don Whiteside, is right here. I'll be talking about him. He said he's not going to say anything publicly, but afterwards he'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Apart from my mom, I have a nephew there, and then my aunts and uncles, and my cousins, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, who, by the way, were also owned the house across the street here, and then my great-great-grandparents, I believe, if the Thomas Whiteside here is the same one that's in the family tree. I'm not the family historian, and I'm pretty ignorant, and this was a surprise for me, being asked to come here, so I don't know very much, but what I do know, I'll let you know. And I don't want to go any further before I say, is it James or Jim? Or?
Call me Scott.
Oh, Scott, sorry, yeah, so Scott. So your uncle was Bill, right?
That's right.
Well, my dad went to school with him, that he called him Billy. And then my dad's cousins on the Whitesides worked for the Rowe family, taking care of horses. So that's a bit of amazing how things just intersect. And when I come here with my kids a couple times a year and to clean up around my mom's tombstone, I make sure I walk around and I show them all these that are connected to us, and not just my immediate family, but my dad's cousins. He has Houghtons and Daltons and Drapers, and so if there's anyone by that, well, we already mentioned some Houghtons today, didn't we? And so maybe we're connected somewhere along the way.
Wendy Whiteside.
Wendy?
Wendy.
I'm not sure, but I have something to say about...
Married a cousin, Wayne Robinson.
Oh, well, you would have to ask my dad, but I do have a little note there about Whitesides as opposed to Whiteside. But anyways, what I was going to say. Well, let's just jump in. Well, okay, so we'll do this. No, this is totally unprepared, but I just have it, right? Okay. And so, it seems to me amazing that here you have, just talking about those children that died, and that lady that Mark was talking about, the one surviving child, Pearl Nevils, is my dad's mom. And so it seems amazing to me that here you have some people who lived and died in the 19th century, and in the 21st century, if you shake my dad's hand, you're shaking the hand of the nephew of those kids. And if you don't manage to shake his hand, you just touch the hem of his garment, you are being touching someone who is the nephew of someone who lived 2 centuries ago, when you look at it that way. This information that I have here, I only received this this morning from my niece, who is interested in ancestry, and so she sent a bunch of things, and then Mark kindly organized it into this PowerPoint presentation. See everyone else doing that too, eh? Next, okay. And was there a next?
Yep, there is.
What am I doing wrong here?
I think you need to put it well over to the right.
We're all over to the right, okay.
Yeah.
Over here?
Yeah.
Okay, good, okay. And you have that, you kindly, the pointer that we saw recently? That would be handy. Thank you. Yeah. My dad's oldest sister, who is in the cemetery now, and she told me that she remembers her grandmother telling her about her grandmother coming to Canada as an Empire Loyalist in a wagon. So that's amazing that I know someone who knew someone who knew someone who came as an Empire Loyalist. Let's see, is there anything I can say here? Well, then she married the Whiteside. My dad was born on the 13th line, about 2 properties over from Highway 27, and he was actually born there. If you were given a chance to ask him, he'd say he hated being on that farm, and he couldn't wait to get off of it. And when he was a little kid, as a matter of fact, on one occasion, he ran away to Toronto, but he didn't get too far. And you'll notice that, well, there's something I'll point out there if I see it later. So Eliza Jane Nevils was married to, so that would be my dad's great-grandfather. If I'm wrong, anyone just contradict me, and especially my dad. So I believe that's my great-grandfather. My Aunt Esther again told me an interesting thing that, wrong one, that Eliza James told her, my aunt, that they were rather, let's say, prudish, that she never saw her husband naked. And yet they still got to have a whole bunch of children, so you figure that one. That's right. So there's my grandmother, and Pearl Nevils, and it says she's 17 years old there. Somewhere else it said she was 17. Yeah, that picture is 1908. And she was 17 years old, and then she married my dad's father, Joseph Henry, except they called him Harry. And as well, the name Houston is interesting to me because on my mom's side, her mother's last name was, well, she would be insulted if you said Houston. She would, because my mom was directly from Scotland. She would say Houston, not Houston. So I'm wondering, you know, who knows if there's a relationship there. And so that's my dad there. That's my grandfather up there. My grandfather had the farm that was on the 13th, but then he was able to get off the farm because he got a cushy job sometime in the 1930s up in Orillia at the sanitarium where people who were quarantined with tuberculosis. And so they bought a property up there, and my dad said when he was a little kid, those are the happiest memories of his time. But then his dad got tuberculosis, and they fired him. He became an invalid, and so he had to go back to that farm there. And so I remember when I was a kid going to the farmhouse that's there. And now that's not there anymore. It was torn down and became part of White Rose Nurseries. But when I was a kid, it was still there, and I remember going up the second floor, and the floor was sagging. We found some interesting things there, such as down in the basement. Now, this house hadn't been lived in the 1950s, since the 1950s, and yet down in the basement we found preserves that my dad's mom had made. And we went to the barn, and there was this buggy that I think my dad had made for them, and that their dog Blackie they would harness him and take the kids for rides, and that buggy was still there. And my dad told us stories of jumping off the beam into the haystack. He also told stories of hating to have to do the butter churn, and also the same kind of churn, but for the laundry, and how he hated doing that because you took it up and down, put it up and down. And he also hated when he had to go out into the fields and to pull up what you call mustard. What do you call mustard now? You don't have any idea?
Canola.
Canola, that's right. Canola, right? But back then, my dad says it was a disgrace for a farmer to allow rapeseed, as well it's called, to allow that to grow on their properties, and so he would have to go and pull that stuff up. And he also told me about in Cookstown here, next to that, you know, the big old house that belonged to the Mr. Cook, I suppose, who founded that Cookstown. And so apparently he rented that, before that got rented out to some farmers who let it go idle, and there was mustard growing there, and the other farmers around the area were disgusted because that wasn't being pulled out. Okay, there's my dad there, and my mom, Rachel, and so there is my dad's brother. By the way, my dad also lied to get into the army in the Second World War, but he got caught when he went when he made it out to Winnipeg, and he got caught, and he got put into jail until he was deported back to Ontario. But he didn't give up. And so he found out that the Merchant Marines would take anyone. And so he went, and lo and behold, they did take him. And so at the age of 17 or 18, he was out in the Wagon Ivy of the Merchant Marines. And so he served in the Atlantic and in the Pacific as well. Then my dad has another notoriety. He went to jail and was there for a good many years. And while he was shortly after that, when he got out of Kingston Penitentiary, he trusted in Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior, and then he decided that he wanted to become a missionary, and which is how I was born in Colombia. But Colombia, South America, when first he wanted to become a missionary, he was told that in those days men with criminal records could not leave the country. And so he asked what can be done. And he asked an RCMP officer. He went to talk about it, and that officer told him that he would have to get a Queen's pardon. But he said, no Canadian had ever received a Queen's pardon, and don't think that you're going to be the first one," were his words. But my dad wasn't to be discouraged, and he applied it for it, and he got the Queen's pardon, and so he was the first Canadian to have received a Queen's pardon. My uncle Ainsley lived and I went to his house many times. He was the only one who remained in the community in Churchill over the ways here, over by Young Street. And a little trivia. That Nevils, who died in the First World War, my grandmother was the only child that survived. So they adopted, what was his name? Gordon, yeah. So they adopted Gordon. And so he wasn't a blood, but he was a blood relative because he came from the Draper side, and so he was my dad's cousin. And so they adopted him, and then maybe foolishly, because he was very young, he went off to the war. And young people, they think that they're not going to be the ones who get killed, but sometimes they are. And that's my great grandmother, and there's another more cousins, so the Nichols. And so when I was a teenager, my dad went to visit his cousins. He hadn't seen them in about 50 years, the Nichols, and so he's also related to the Nichols, and so that's a picture of them. I don't know what year that is. And so that's my grandfather, and my grandmother are right there, and that's my uncle Ainsley. But then also there's all the other aunts and uncles are there in the cemetery right here. And I'm sure my dad could tell you all sorts of stories. But,
There you go. So I added this slide.
Oh, okay.
Now you said your dad or Whiteside lived in one of these houses. I wanted
Yes,
to know
yes.
which one it is.
My dad can point it out to you because they all look the same to me. I'm never sure which one it is, but it's one of those. I believe it's white the last time I looked at it. So my dad could point it out to you maybe later. Dad, you wouldn't know. My Aunt Esther, she was the oldest of the family and born in 1914. She can remember going to church with my dad's grandmother, this church right here. So there's even more connection.
That should be it.
Okay. Well, I mentioned about, thank you very much. There was a family tree there I didn't see, but that's fine. And there's a branch of it that has Whitesides on it, and we're Whiteside. And so this morning I asked my niece, are you sure you have the right family tree? Because Whitesides, plural, isn't like Whiteside, us. And she said, no, that's the right. That at some point, talking about changing last names, that my Whiteside side, they decided to drop the last S. Maybe for the same reason, because there was too many Whitesides running around. As a matter of fact, one time I bumped into a Whitesides, and we got talking. I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "From Alliston." And I said, "Maybe we're related." And he said, "No, actually I'm Whitesides and you're Whiteside, so I doubt we're related." But after what my niece told me, maybe we are related somewhere along the way. I'm not sure what else to say, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.